All right. So welcome to a very special edition of Wellsness Wednesdays. Every Wednesday night we do a conversation that sometimes is with artists. We did yoga a couple weeks ago. We've done an open mic night. Tonight is a very special one. And I'm Tom Quaintance. I'm the producing artistic director at Virginia Stage Company.
And I am Anthony Stockard, the producing artistic director of the NSU Theater Company and director of the Drama and Theater program at Norfolk State University.
So this Wellsness Wednesday, we're having a really fantastic panel. And this started with a conversation I had with Anthony in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and the unrest that was happening after that, the protests. And I called Anthony and I said, look, as a leader in the theater community, as a leader in the Black community, what do you want to see coming out of Virginia Stage Company? What should Virginia Stage Company be doing right now? And Anthony's response.
Tom asked me about what those things were, and he told me, think about it, get back to me when you have an idea. But the instant he said it, I knew what the immediate response would be, and that would be to present the Parchman Hour. It was a collaboration that we had done that spoke so vividly, specifically, honestly, openly, without agenda, just a picture of what life was at one time, and in these moments feel like it's sort of echoing back into the world in a way that was a little uncanny, and that we could do a great work by putting this information out there again and letting the community see it at a broader level here remotely.
Yeah, so when we had that conversation, I went back, I took a look at the archival footage we had, which was good. We had a multi-camera shoot, but putting out an archive of the thing, I've always found archive productions of theater to be somewhat flat. The dialogue scenes weren't quite landing, and so we came up with this idea of let's try to do something that's a combination of the two. That is, we'll get to try to get the cast back together. We will do a version where we take the archive and then we marry it to live Zoom footage. And here's a trailer of what's going to be being presented from Thursday to Sunday. Trailer right here.
Just to get points for honest.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Got on my traveling shoes. Got on my traveling shoes.
So part of that conversation, so this is, so Thursday, tomorrow, we'll have our virtual opening night that is what I think is a pretty extraordinary production. But tonight, we have a very special panel that was partly really based on this conversation Anthony and I had about the current relevance of the Parchman Hour. Anthony and I put the panel together, put the panelists together, and we're very excited to welcome them here. We're going to introduce Barbara Hamm Lee, who is our moderator. Barbara is an award-winning journalist, television radio host, best known as the executive producer and host of Another View, which is a weekly public radio show that discusses today's issues from an African-American perspective. And tomorrow's show, which is at noon, is going to talk about the debate. So we're going to be done before 9 o'clock tonight because you're going to be watching the debate along with most of the rest of us. Barbara is an expert at navigating the difficult terrain of race relations. This is one of the reasons why she's here in this conversation. She specializes in diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice programming. And this is the first time, Barbara, that I've heard justice added to that DEI, and I think it's fantastic. justice programming and leadership training for government agencies, schools, nonprofits, and corporations seeking racial cultural change. Barbara, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate it. And Anthony, thank you very, very much. I've worked with both of you before, and I appreciate being here this afternoon. And good evening to everyone. Thank you for muting your microphones so that you can hear our panelists. We are going to be talking about theater as society's mirror, and we're going to be using the Parchman Hour, the story of freedom riders at Parchman Penitentiary, contrasted with the Black Lives Matters civil rights movement today. So this is from the Mississippi Civil Rights Project. During the Freedom Rides in 1961, freedom riders were arrested in Jackson for challenging segregation on public buses. 27 riders rode from Montgomery, Alabama to Jackson on May 24th, 1961. As soon as they got off the bus, they were immediately arrested. After they were sentenced to jail, more and more freedom rides took place, often ending in Jackson where they were arrested. More than 300 freedom riders were arrested, and many of them were sent to Parchman. Now, Parchman the freedom riders were kept in very poor conditions, given clothes that did not fit, they were not allowed to exercise or leave their cells, and often served inedible food and ridiculed by prison officials. When the prisoners refused to stop singing freedom songs, their mattresses were taken away. However, the jail also served another purpose. According to Raymond Arsenault in Freedom Riders, I quote, "In effect, the Freedom Riders turned a prison into an unruly but ultimately enlightening laboratory where competing theories of nonviolent struggle could be discussed and tested. In the darkest corners of Parchman, where prison authorities had hoped to break the riders' spirits, a remarkable mix of personal and political education became the basis of individual and collective survival." So it was a very, very special place, even though it wasn't intended to be that way. So what are the lessons from Parchman that we can see in the Black Lives Matters movement today? Is BLM a continuation of Parchman in a digital world, or is it brand new? We have a stellar panel with us to bring us some insight. Acclaimed actor and playwright Mike Wiley has spent the last decade fulfilling his mission to bring educational theater to young audiences and communities across the country. In the early days of his career, Wiley found very few theatrical resources to shine a light on key events and figures in African American history. To bring these stories to life, he started his own production company and bringing to light African American history through theatrical productions like the Parchman Hour. Mike has a master's in fine arts from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and is a 2010 and 2014 Lehman Brady Visiting Joint Chair Professor in Documentary Studies and American Studies at Duke University and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Mike, turn your mic on. There you go. How are you? And unmute yourself. Welcome. We're so happy to have you with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Her Freedom Rider
Hey,
mugshot.
Mike, I'm gonna become an audience member now. So as you introduce the panelists, Mike, Barbara, have a great panel. I'll be back at the very end.
Okay. Her Freedom Rider mugshot has been called one of the most iconic in American history. By the time she was 23 years old, Joan Trumpauer Mulholland participated in over 50 sit-ins and demonstrations, including the Freedom Rides, the Jackson Woolworth sit-in, the March on Washington, the Meredith March, and the Selma to Montgomery March. Her path has crossed with some of the biggest names in the civil rights movement: Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Fannie Lou Hamer, John Lewis, Diane Nash, and Julian Bond, just to name a few. We are so excited to have with us Joan Mulholland. Joan, can you turn your camera on? And you can see her mugshot there. We can take that down and bring up Joan. Do we have her?
Well, I'm muted.
There you are. How are you? We're so happy to have you with us.
Not as American as I was back in the day, but you know.
Can you turn your camera on, Joan?
I keep turning it on, but it keeps going off.
There you are, right there. Yep, that's perfect. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Chief Larry Boone began his successful law enforcement career with the Norfolk Police Department in 1989 and was appointed chief in 2016. Chief Boone regularly volunteers in the community and participates in mentorship programs for Norfolk's youth. The citizens of Norfolk refer to Chief Boone as a different kind of police chief. Unlike his peers, Chief Boone's inner city youth experiences shaped his mental marathon of endurance to withstand difficult challenges in the pursuit of a better life that serves others. Chief Boone strives to improve and build long-lasting relationships with the community through authentic engagement. He says, quote, "If you're not authentic, people know it before you say anything. Crime suppression is necessary, but it's not everything. A genuine interest in the lives you protect is where we will begin." Thank you so much, Chief Boone, for joining us. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. And Khadijah Miller, Dr. Khadijah Miller, is interim dean of the Robert C. Nussbaum Honors College and professor of interdisciplinary studies at Norfolk State University. She earned her PhD in African American Studies with a graduate certificate in Women's Studies from Temple University in Philadelphia. She is vice president on the board of directors for the Association of Interdisciplinary Studies and a board member of the ACE Women's Virginia Network. Prior to joining the faculty at NSU, she served as director of the Women's Studies Program and Women's Center at Rosemont College, Pennsylvania. Her current research interests and projects include Black women's historical activism, minority health disparities in public health with a particular focus on Black women, and Black women ethics. Thank you, Dr. Miller, for joining us. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara.
So I'm going to start with that question. Are the protests today a continuation of the work of the Freedom Riders, or is this brand new? Have we as a society as a whole, and African Americans in particular, made progress since the Freedom Riders movement, or is Black Lives Matter the digital version of what happened in the 60s? And Joan, I'm going to start with you since you are a Freedom Rider.
Yes, I served my time at Parchman, but I think, you know, my generation took care of legal segregation, but we didn't eliminate racism, which was the foundation of the laws. And so I think Black Lives Matter is working on the foundation of racism, and we still got a long way to go.
Mike, what about you? And unmute yourself. There you go.
I agree with Joan. You know, as I researched the Freedom Riders, I discovered that there were so many conversations about whether that moment or that time in Parchman was a moment in time or whether it was a movement that would transcend just being in Parchman. And we now see that certainly it was a movement, and that movement is now again on fire, on the ground with us again. I don't think that the movement has ever stopped. It has been quieted, certainly, muted at times, but it's still a movement, and in that, the iconic statement of, you know, no one is free until we're all free. That is the basis of what the Black Lives Matter movement is, and what the Freedom Riders movement that started so many years ago was as well.
Chief Boone, law enforcement has been a part of all of it, whether it's Parchman, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it was the civil rights movement of the 60s. Is it getting better, or is it just as bad?
Well, quite naturally, it's getting better. If it hadn't gotten any better, I wouldn't be here today, or any other African-American chiefs throughout the country. There's two incidents in this history of our country as it relates to law enforcement in the African-American community. You take May 3rd, 1963, Birmingham, Alabama, under the leadership of Bull Connor, who was the police chief then. He was the police chief at that time that deployed the fire hoses and the dogs on the African-American civil rights marchers. From that incident alone, JFK said that he did more for civil rights unknowingly than anybody else had done up until that time. Because for a very, very long time, African Americans in that region had been saying they hadn't been treated fairly. He was so bold in his leadership that he did that in the presence of 200 journalists, to include NBC, CBS, and ABC. The black and white footage we all see every day. Fast forward 50-something years later, you take the incident with George Floyd. That officer was so bold. He did what he did for the whole world to see. Out of that incident, you have all these policies that are coming forth with respect to criminal justice reform, and it's not going to stop. Those two incidents highlighted, with respect to law enforcement in the African-American community, things that the community has been saying for a very, very long time. And unfortunately, there'll be another incident, and we'll be doing this again.
Dr. Miller, you know, one of the things that Black Lives Matter has focused on is also the desperate treatment of Black women. And I know that that's one of your specialties. You know, since Parchman, have we made progress?
I would love to say yes in some respects, but no. But I will say this, if I can just say one thing into your former question. I want to say that women, in terms of Black Lives Matter movement and the Freedom Riders, so Black women have been at the center of these movements. When you look at the Black women and Freedom Riders, Lucretia Mott, Diane Nash, Lucretia Collins, Catherine Burke, these Black college students participated, actively left their colleges, left the comforts that they had to stand up for what they believed in. You look at the Black Lives Matter movement, you have Alicia Garza and Patrisse Cullors and Opal Tometi, who began the Black Lives Matter movement, Black women, again, who stood up. So I think it's important to acknowledge the continuum of the active role of Black women in these ongoing civil rights movements, if you will. And so Black women continue to play a vital role. Unfortunately, though, you go back to 1896, you had the formation of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs. Black women came together across the country because a journalist, interesting this journalism tie, but a journalist, Jax, from Missouri, said that Black women were licentious and uncontrolled, they had an uncontrollable sexual appetite. And so they come together, they galvanize and say, oh, wait a second, no, we have morals, we're upstanding. And so that is, it's a sad but ongoing continuum in American history. I would say a fascination with Black women into the sense that we work to oppress them and put it in place in systems and policies and practices. And so the Black Lives Movement, like the Freedom Riders, like the Civil Rights Movement, they're a continuum of Black women standing up for themselves to gain a space and place and respect.
Joan, you know, first of all, the play itself, Parchman Hour, is so powerful, and just watching the actors reenact what was real life for you is stunning. But I wonder if you could give our listening folks, our people who have joined us on Facebook as well as here on Zoom, a sense of, first of all, why you got involved and what it was like when you wound up at Parchman.
Well, I got the Freedom Rides. I'd already been involved in sit-ins and, you know, in jail a few times, or at least arrested. And the Howard University group was just as fast out the door when the buses were stopped as that Nashville crowd. But Nashville was closer, particularly before the interstates. So we got there second, and I got a call from Paul Dietrich of our Howard group, middle of the night. Joan, we're trapped in the church in Montgomery. I can't talk. Send more riders. People were limited to a 2 to 3 minute phone call, each family. And so I started calling around, and the Howard group got more people coming, and I claimed credit, since I was the recruiter, of bringing my buddy Stokely on the Freedom Rides. We flew to New Orleans. Tickets were $52 back then, and took the Illinois Central to Jackson, and promptly got ourselves arrested. So that's how I got into it. First the city jail, then after our trial to the county jail. And the worst part of that for me was being in this cell. Of course, the jail cells were segregated, with all these white Yankee women who came on the Freedom Rides because they did not approve of or like white Southerners. And I was the only white Southerner in that cell. Wow. Having to tell them what grits were. You know, that's pitiful. And well, it got so crowded that we were down to less than 3 square feet of floor space per prisoner in our cell. So people were doubled up on the bunks, sleeping under the bunks, curled up in the dripping shower stall. It was hard to sleep. They had to do something. And they did think of the cattle barns at the fairgrounds, but they saved that for later after Medgar was killed. But they figured they'd put us up in the worst prison in the country, took the prisoners off death row and moved them to a nicer place. And now I understand the guys had it a lot harder than the women. But man, let me tell you, it was so much roomier and cleaner, and the food was so much better than that mess down in the county jail. They even gave us fried chicken on the 4th of July, which was amazing.
At Parchman. At Parchman.
At Parchman.
So I'm curious, as a Southern white woman, what was your impetus to get involved in the first place?
Well, I went to school as a kid, and we had to memorize those Bible verses and get gold stars in our Bible. You know, love thy neighbor as thyself, and do unto others should have them do unto you. And once down visiting grandma in Oconee, Georgia, not that fancy resort, but a company-owned logging town, dirt road, railroad track down the middle, train came through twice a day and every house shook. That train was called the Nancy Hanks. Y'all know who Nancy Hanks was? Anybody? Abraham Lincoln's mama. So you know a Yankee owned that train. Yes, indeed, Yankee owned. Well, my little playmate every summer, we sort of dared each other to go walk through Inward Town, which is, you know, we did say it. And it was creepy. It was even worse than where the white folks lived. And then we got to the school for the colored. Colored was the polite term then. Calling somebody black, that was fighting words. But when we got to the colored school, it was a one-room, unpainted shack. Doors ajar, you could see the pot-bellied stove for heat. No electricity, no water, just a hand pump out in the yard, no glass or screens in the windows, just wooden shutters, no playground equipment, nothing. And one outhouse, one for everybody. So I'm telling you, this unisex bathroom thing ain't nothing new. They had it in Oconee back in the early 50s. But out the other end of town was a brand new brick school for the white kids. Fanciest building for miles around. Still is, but now it's a senior citizens home. And just looking at the colored school and knowing about the white school just told me that everything was wrong, because I hadn't given any thought to segregation before that. And I sort of knew, couldn't have put it in words, but I knew when I had a chance to do something to make the South, didn't care about them Yankees, but to make the South the best it could be for everybody, I would do it. And then the sit-in started in '60 when I was at Duke and off to jail.
Are you surprised, or have you participated in the marches today?
Well, no, because my knees aren't what they used to be. I can't march, but I can run my mouth, as you're seeing. Spoken at some events that were connected with the marches here in Arlington, but I have not marched. I can't.
I'm curious from each of you, I'd love to hear what your participation has been, if any, whether you marched or you rode or you did something else. I remember, as an example, and I will kick it off, when I was, when Dr. King was assassinated, I'm from Baltimore, lived in Baltimore, and I was 10 years old. And I remember tying black ribbon around the antenna of the car. Goes to show you how long ago that was, right? Tying a black ribbon around the antenna and posting a black ribbon on the front door so that they would not burn our house, that they would know that there were Black people who lived here during the riots that ensued after Dr. King. Mike, I'm wondering, have you had any personal experience in protest?
So in the last few years, particularly with the election in 2016, certainly have protested, marched in New York, here in North Carolina as well. We've also, my wife and I have involved our young sons, 12 and 9-year-old, getting them out there to march along with us. Also, in the town that I live in, there was a Confederate statue in the center of town, as there are all over the place. And we had some county commissioners that had the bravery and the forethought to give it back to the daughters of the Confederacy. And that took about a year. And so over the course of that year, there were many protests, many afternoons and evenings standing out there on the opposite side of people trying to protect that particular statue, and so on and so forth. So one afternoon, actually one morning, my wife came home and she said, "There's a fella standing out where the statue was after it was removed. There's a fella standing out there in a Confederate uniform." And I said, "Well, I should put on the, because I am an actor and a playwright. I said, well, I should put on the Union soldier costume that I have and go out there and stand beside him with a sign." And so I did. I went out there, and at first he thought that I was siding with him. Right? He didn't really look at the colors or anything like that. He thought, oh, here's a fellow that's on our side. He didn't really look at the sign that I had in my hand that I was holding up that said, was pointing to him, that said racist nonsense. He didn't look at the sign until a little while later, and he looked at it, and then he goes, "Well, you don't know your history." And all I could do was laugh. And I said, "Brother, you don't know your history." So it's been the season to certainly protest, and I've gotten out there. But most of the protesting I do is I try and do it through my writing and through my performance.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Miller?
Mm-hmm. I was gonna share that I too, I have a quick story. When I was undergrad at, I'll say just an unnamed school in New York, it came to our attention that after Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, that the school had promised to start a Black Studies program. And when I was at that school in the late 80s, early 90s, they still hadn't. It was an administrative office by name. And so when we uncovered that, the Black Student Union, we said, well, this is uncalled for. We wanted to talk to the president, and we galvanized and We stayed at the president's office for about a week until eventually they were sick of us sitting there, you know, taking turns rotating. And they were like, what do y'all want? We was like, we want what you promised back in 1968. And so, and then that school finally started. So I actually graduated with a minor in Africana Studies, and then they have worked and they have a full-fledged program as well. I would say that it's important, I just want to share that to protest means to have solemn dissent, that you believe that something is not right and you stand up for that right. And I would want to emphasize that to protest is respectable. That's your citizenship. That because you want to live in a space and place that is fair and equitable and has opportunity for everyone. And so there are ways to protest through your work, through your writings. And so I just want to encourage, especially Norfolk State, we have students here, and I want them to recognize that there are many different modes. All of the movements have been successful because you had people on the front line, you had people behind the scenes, you had people in different roles. And so it takes many hands, you know, to put their shoulder to the wheel to get it done. And so protests can come in many different ways, and I want to emphasize that.
Okay, how about you, Chief Boone?
Yes, I've been involved in multiple protests, not just myself, my staff as well, starting from Ferguson. We're real unique here in Norfolk. We've had multiple protests, and we've been fortunate. There hadn't been any rioting, looting, any arrests, things of that nature. We tend to allow those folks protesting to air their grievances. We make it safe so that they can travel up and down the streets of Norfolk. Sometimes they aren't very kind. They say things to the officers that could be deemed disrespectful, but you know, I'm very proud of the women and men of this department. What they've done, you know, after being, you know, insulted, they go to the intersection and make it safe for those to express their First Amendment right. One particular protest I want to highlight is there was a gathering at one of the police stations. Now, I typically don't go to any of the meeting locations, but I went this time because the night before, the Minneapolis police station had been set on fire. So the protesters showed up at the PLC, which is located on Virginia Beach Boulevard, about 350, give or take. And I was in my vehicle right beside them. And because my windows are dark, they didn't know that. And at some point they got bored and they said, we're going to Norfolk State. They went to Norfolk State and they decided to come back to the police station. And we've had individuals within the group that don't look like law enforcement, but they are law enforcement. And the plan was to come back to the police station and kick in the doors and the windows and things of that nature. I heard one of my officers say, well, bring out the riot team. Now, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to capture or memorialize that image of the riot team and their riot gear lined up in front of the police station and the protesters on the other side. So I told them to stand down, and when the protesters returned back to the police station, they saw me. One of them recognized me because we meet with our protesters, those organizing the protests, long before the incidents, and we've been doing this long before George Floyd. And I asked them if I could speak to the crowd. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, the crowd was upset. They had a right to be based on what was going on. And they surrounded me, and I'm telling you, when I say they were an inch away from my face where I could feel and smell spittle, and I understood. But at some point, I kept talking to them and they came down. And I let them air their grievances. I must have handled about 40 or 50 questions. And I think they were surprised that I was comfortable. I went right into the middle of all of them and started answering questions. And at some point they started chanting, "March with us." And before we started to march, one of them gave me a sign, and the sign said, BLM. Now, consciously, I knew in my profession to hold that sign, and I'll challenge you on this, it could be career ending in law enforcement. Go to Google, you'll see no other African-American chief in this country holding that sign. But at the same time, the young man said, your ancestors would be proud of you. I held the sign, they took a photograph, and we started marching. And I only went 2 blocks because they wanted to start asking me questions again. But in that moment, I wanted to be credible. I had to back up everything I said prior to marching. And you know, I'll tell you what happened nationally the very next day. Police chiefs and executives across the country were doing something similar to express their support.
You know, when you bring up BLM, you say Black Lives Matter, from a movement perspective as well as from the phrase itself. Why do you all think that causes such angst? And I'm going to start with you, Dr. Miller. You know, the mere fact that you say Black Lives Matter, the automatic response first and foremost is all lives matter. Can you please explain why that's not the answer and why you think that that is such a galvanizing for some, disruptive for others in terms of how people perceive Black Lives Matter?
I think the opposition and even the anger that comes when we say Black Lives Matter, it lends itself to systemic white supremacy. It's embedded throughout our entire society. And so anything that isn't all lives, you know, when you think about it, even our language speaks to this, the embedded white supremacist aspect of our society, that's the standard. And so when we say, I see a man, or I see a Black man, or I see an Asian man. So if you're if you're an American, it's implicit that you're a white American. But if you're any other type of American, you have to put an identifier on it. And so for you to say that Black Lives Matter, it becomes the antithesis of white lives mattering, which is what it's not about. But in our hegemonic society, when white is the standard and that white privilege, that's the first thing that comes to mind. If you're not talking about white lives, then who are you talking about? And so that is why the Black Lives Matter rouse up this, and some people may not even be aware of these feelings that they hold, because it's like that electric company, I'm dating myself, that electric company, well, it used to say, you know, which one of these doesn't belong? And, you know, it would have a square and a circle and a triangle, and you would have to pick the one that doesn't belong. So from an early age, if you don't belong, then you're not, if you don't fit into what is considered the standard, then you don't belong. And so we have to have space for Black lives in every other life. And at this moment in time, given what has been occurring right in front of our faces because of this wonderful cell phone, we need to put some attention on Black lives because they do matter. We know they matter. They've been here a long time. They built the country. They contribute to the economy. They matter. And so they can't just matter in the labor force. They have to matter in every other aspect of our society.
Joan, when you were writing, could you have said, the thought of a phrase, Black Lives Matter, would that have been a part of your experience as a freedom rider?
Well, we didn't put it in words, but that was the whole point of things. Now, I want to say on this, but my son Loki, the filmmaker, he has a T-shirt which strikes people with shock and awe. It says, "Until Black Lives Matter, no lives matter." That's second only to his Omega T-shirt for getting shock from people. But I think that sort of expresses my attitude and sums it up rather nicely, that until Black lives matter, no lives matter.
Mhm. You know, what about you, Mike? What do you think in terms of why Black Lives Matter causes some people to have such anxiety?
Well, I think that it is, it's like Dr. Miller was saying, it is a pushback from a society of people, white people, that that have had their history taught in our schools, have had their history and their image more often than not on our television sets, in our newspapers, in our magazines, and for them, it's this knee-jerk reaction to being to feeling like they might be somehow pushed out of the frame, right? Or somehow have to share the history book or the history books with us, but not only us, with other people of color, right? And so that's what it is. It's a white supremacist knee-jerk reaction to what is a genuine desire to be included, right? Included. However, it is a pushing and a protest against that inclusion. The folks that say all lives matter might not want to say that, they might not want to admit to that, but that's what it is, right? It's a pushing back against not being dominant.
I want to ask you, you mentioned the fact that your children marched. My 11-year-old granddaughter marched in Baltimore. And I want to direct this specifically to Joan and Khadijah and Mike, from this perspective about young people being involved in civil rights and making the civil rights movement, and why that's important. You know, I'm having discussions with people who say, you know, 10, 11, 9, 10, 11-year-olds are too young, and we shouldn't be putting them out there. Why is it critical that young people are also involved? And Joan, you were in college when you rode, right?
Yeah, well, I was out for the year, but I had already been accepted at Tougaloo College, in spite of the fact that my high school up here would not send my transcripts. But I think young people have got to participate in, and there's not anything too young, so that the problem becomes sort of understood with them and possible solutions are there, you know, that they can see. I think they can understand it better if they, from the time they're in the stroller, are taken along on things. Because if you wait till you're older, you know, an adult, then you've already got your mindset prejudices well established. So my kids were taken, well, we weren't marching then, but they were taken to Tougaloo's campus and the Medgar Evers home, and you know, things like that. And so they got something of a feel for it, and they stood out at school because they were friends with everybody, that they liked you or didn't like you on your personality, not your color. And some of the teachers were concerned that they didn't have enough white friends. I thought it was fine. I mean, we're all out of Africa. You go back genetically. Oh, and by the way, I got a little sight of the jails in Baltimore. I've been sitting at the lunch counter with my friends, you know. The Howard group and the Baltimore group work together. And so I got to know a touch of Baltimore.
Got a touch of my hometown.
Yeah.
Dr. Miller, you're working with college students. You know, I'm sure they have lots to say about what's going on. Why is it critical that we have young people involved?
It's critical because and it sounds cliche, but it's true. They're the future. They're the now. We have seen, if you look at statistics, just look at the last 4 general elections. You see, excluding 2016, but you look at 2008, 2012, and you look at the activity of young people now. When young people vote, we see a difference in the election. Not just when young people vote, but they experience it. And I think we do ourselves a disjustice if we try to sweep it, under the rug, so to speak. I have 2 teenage daughters, 13 and 18, and we have discussions. My 13-year-old, when she was in the 4th grade, she had to have a discussion with her, we had to have a discussion with her teacher, because the question was, why did Africans come to the United States? And the teacher was like, because to help the economy. No, they were enslaved. And so we have to engage in conversations with our young people. Young people are thinking beings. And so they're going to question. And so it's better for us to have this discussion and have them involved. And they can get involved in multiple ways, and through civic engagement and activism and registering to vote and voting. They can be consciously aware of what's going on in their communities, in the schools, safety patrols. One of the activities we have students do is to contact their local council persons. And as a result of that, I had 2 students who got street lights, because their street lights, their streets were dark. And so there's so many levels of participation, and that impacts them directly. And so once you identify that and give them the tools to engage, young people, they're just going to go, and they're going to do it and create the change. And we've seen that. We've seen that with the Freedom Riders. It was young people in the 60s. We've seen that with the women's movement. We've seen that in all the multiple movements in our country. When young people take a hold, watch out.
Mike, did you get pushback when by taking your children, your 9 and 11-year-olds, and having them march?
No, not at all. People were very supportive, and they had made their own signs as well. I just don't, no pushback at all. I wanted to add that that the Parchman Hour wouldn't exist had it the play wouldn't exist had it not been for the fact that I wanted to create a piece that that utilized the actors, students that were the same age as Joan and her comrades in '61. Right, I wanted to create it started as a college piece, a joint production between Duke and UNC, and I had no idea that it would even go this far. At the time, I really wanted to incite dialogue between in these young people, these 18, 19, 20-year-olds about civic duty, about Black Lives Matter, about all of the things that they should be certainly concerned about. And at that time, perhaps because we are being fed this, we're kind of in this post-racial America because of the election of Obama, which was entirely bunk, right? Sure, we made progress, absolutely. But as I said earlier, the movement was only muted, right? It was only quieted. And so I wanted to create a space for these young people to not only lift up the memory of these freedom riders who were writing their wills before they went down to Mississippi, who were calling their parents and said, I'm not coming home tomorrow, or I might not be home next week, right? Or skipping their final exams, doing things that were detrimental. They were sacrificing. And so I wanted to at least have these students see what sacrifice looked like. And then they were performing for other students. And so therefore, those students were able to show these students who had not done the research that they had done what sacrifice looked like.
We have a question from Facebook, and it says, do you believe that most people want to change, or are they just afraid to speak up? Chief Boone, let me start with you on that one.
Well, I think innately human beings are good people. We tend to yield to our better angels. I think people want to change. I can tell you this, the women and men of this department, you know, after I held the Black Lives Matter sign, I felt compelled to meet with them all, and I did just that. And we talked about, you know, the various programs that we have in this city. And I'll be honest with you, we have a lot of programs in which we interface with the Black and brown community. And a lot of my officers that participate in this are white, and they do it willingly. But one of the things I wanted to educate them about was why Black Lives Matter. And what I told them was, and I met with hundreds of officers, you know, when you look in our country, I don't care what year it is, okay? You can go back as far as you can go back. When you look at the positive indicators in our country, the positive indicators, we're typically at the bottom. And when you look at the negative indicators in our country, we're typically at the top. And I did a little exercise with them. The room was mostly white officers. I said, how many of you ever been on food stamps? A couple hands went up, Black officers. How many of you have ever been to jail or know a family member that's been to jail? A couple hands went up, mostly Black officers. And mind you, my hand went up, my hand stayed up. I say all that to say, I believe, I do, because I saw those folks out there doing those protests. It was young people, and they were full of energy. It was Black, white, you know, LGBTQ plus, Asian, Hispanic. And I had one young white guy giving me hell. He said, Chief, you know that young Black men are treated differently doing traffic stops. You know, I could be stopped and I'm going to be treated differently. And he just kept peppering me with that. And I said, well, there's a possibility, okay, because I've been stopped, you know, before, but there is a possibility you may be treated differently because of the color of your skin. But I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt in Norfolk to the officer until it's proven otherwise by body-worn camera, et cetera. But I'd be remiss if I leave it at that, okay? Because when you look clear across this country, and when you look at body-worn camera footage and the footage that's been captured for all to see, you know, we got to do a better job at hiring the right people. I always say, under conflict, you're going to be whoever you are going to be. And, but for the most part, I truly believe that most people really want to see a change. Not everyone, of course, but most people want to see a change.
Joan, do most white people, I know you don't speak for all white people. I never want to put you in that position because people do that to me all the time. But since you happen to be on our panel, I'm just curious from your perspective, do people really want to change and they're just afraid to speak up, or do they want things to stay as the status quo?
Well, I think they're comfortable with, they're satisfied. If there's something that makes them uncomfortable, that's when they want to see change. And it's just a complete mixed bag. Now, I wanted to say something to Mike about the impact of Parchman Hour. By sheer chance, because you know I do a lot of public speaking, I have been at 2 schools, high school, both of them high schools, and they were doing the Parchman Hour. And I was able to meet the students. Some were in the middle of a rehearsal, and I was brought in, since I was there anyway, to meet them. And just the impact of the play, and I guess meeting me too, but it was powerful, things that they never would have gotten from, you know, the history books. So you've been right successful, sir.
So
Thank you,
one
Jim.
of the things that they talk about with the Black Lives Matter movement, or with the protests in general that have been going on since the murder of George Floyd, some narrative is that all of a sudden now there are many more white people who are participating, that there are many more LGBTQ people who are participating, there are many more Asian, you know, there are many more of everybody. Everybody's protesting. But if you compare that to the Freedom Riders and the other protest movements, you know, there have always been white people who have protested. Is that not right, Dr. Miller?
Asian Americans and Hispanic Americans. I mean, we've all been there, but the
Is
numbers
it different to you this time?
were smaller. But yeah, it was. We've all been there all along, but now there's so many more people of all varieties out there taking it to the streets.
So you said that the crowds are larger now, but which makes it more diverse. But there was always been diversity in protesters, if you will.
Yeah, there were.
Dr. Miller?
Yes, there has always been, and actually history has shown that the more diverse you will, the more impactful the change that comes across. The freedom, what made the freedom, part of what made the Freedom Riders so phenomenal on just so many levels. But I would say one is their tenacity to stay, you know, that no bail, stay in jail. That was impactful. And I think also that it crossed not just gender, but ethnicity and economic as well. So you had, you know, these weren't necessarily poor people, but once you have your quote unquote educated persons saying this is not right, then it grabs a different level of attention. And so that is part of the impact. And so it does cross all. And we see with the civil rights movement in the 50s and the 60s, then out of that came the women's movement, which was heavily white women. And so it's interesting when Black people get rights, other groups end up getting rights as well. And I think that they recognize that, and that's why you have such a large diversity.
Mm-hmm. So will we ever stop marching? Will there ever come a time where we stop marching? Mike?
Part of me wants to say yes, but part of me also wants to say, I hope not. I hope that we all, as a people, as a nation, regardless of what our situation, right, what our station becomes in society, right, that we will still see injustice somewhere in the world and still march, right? We saw injustice here and we marched. We saw injustice in South Africa and we marched. Right? We see injustice all over the world and we continue to march. So again, as I said earlier, until we're all free, none of us are free. And so therefore we must continue to march and we will always march. And if we are pragmatic about it, we will say that the marching will never stop, but the marching has a purpose.
Chief Boone, will we always march? You're muted. There you go.
All right, I'm going to defer to Miss Mulholland. I saw her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed it. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we had not only marching, but other parts of our movement have gone worldwide. I went to the 50th reunion of the Australian Freedom Rides, which were based on ours, for Aboriginal rights. I took my 15-year-old granddaughter. They let her out of school, saying she'd learn more in Australia on this than she would in the classroom. I like that school system. I was in South Africa with a group of ladies, and we were doing a morning of public service. And a group of us went to an elementary school in a sort of an impoverished area of Cape Town. And we spoke about what we did in the States, and we took Q&A, and then we were given our little summary. And I said, back in the day of our civil rights movement, we had a song, "We shall overcome." I was going to say, whatever difficulty you're facing, tell yourself those 3 words and things will get better. I didn't get to. the teacher cut me off and said, oh, back in our apartheid demonstrations, we sang that song, Classroom. Let's all sing it together. And here I am in Cape Town, South Africa, about 5 years ago, with a room full of 4th and 5th graders singing We Shall Overcome. It just brought tears to my eyes. So you start something, you never know how far it's going to go or what part of it will go where, but it's powerful. Just the thing is to get out there and get started.
Yeah, and we tend to think that everything is happening to us here in the United States and not pay attention to the world in terms of the injustices that are going on. Chief Boone?
But the world is paying attention to us, and that's
Yes.
what, you know, the world pays attention to us. Just a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I read where in the Palestinian children, they were passing out these comic books, and the comic books were about the life of Martin Luther King, right?
Wow.
These comic books that were about the life of MLK. And so it says to me again that our stories, the things that we are doing, are making headway around the world, and people are watching how we treat our people, right? How we march and how we protest, and taking their signals from us at times.
All right, Chief Boone, it's your turn.
I forgot the question. I'm kidding.
Will we ever stop marching?
I'm kidding. No, we will never stop marching, unfortunately. Anytime there's a grievance, whether it's here or anywhere else, you know, that's who we are. You know, it's proven to be effective. And as long as there is evil and people are met with grievances, we should not stop marching. As a police chief, and from my perspective, I only ask that, you know, we try to demonstrate our grievances peacefully. And that's not always possible, but we're getting better at it. I mean, when you consider what happened, you know, back in the 60s and how the protesters were met by police to today in some regions of the country, at least. I'm not sure what's going on out west. That's entirely different, but yes.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Miller, will we ever stop marching?
I guess I'm like Mike. I would say probably not. And I think to stay on our toes, I do think it's important for us to learn our history and to know our history, and to know that protest is a form of citizenship. I think we need to reframe how we look at this type of activism and activity. You know, you live in a home, you want your home to be clean, you take care of it, you sweep in front of it. I don't know who sweeps in front of their home, but you sweep in front of it. But you do these things, and you look out for your neighbor and on your immediate block. And so we take that to a larger scale. Then we protect and protest. And the place that we live in, you want it to be safe. And that means that my brother, my 6 nephews, my husband, any men in my life, they should be able to leave our house and be safe, knowing that their rights, their humanity is respected. So it really comes down to just basic respect for all. And until we get there, we're gonna hit the pavement.
I want to show, Maris, you can get the trailer ready, please, the last piece. I want to show the ending of Parchman Hour. And when we come back from watching the video, I want each of you to give us a closing statement, something for people to think about. if you see at the very end, there's vote across the young man's forehead. And one way that we can all protest is to go out and vote. I want to get a closing statement from each one of you, giving our audience something to think about, something to do, whatever it is that you want to share with them as we think about what Joan went through, what people are going through today, as we try to get our society to become equitable for everyone, and as we move forward. And this time, I think I will start with Mike.
I just want to say, thank you to all of you all here tonight, supporting this play, supporting this movement, especially Virginia Stage, Tom Quaintance, and Anthony Stockard, and Norfolk State. But I will say that, in addition to that, I will say that we are in a dark time here in America, but we've been in dark times before. And the way that we have found our way to the light, right? The way we have made our way out of the darkness is together through voting, through finding our voices, finding our feet through protest, and finding our hands on the lever of society, and that lever is by voting. And I urge everyone. Sometimes I feel silly urging anyone that is listening to a conversation like this or participating in a conversation like this to vote, but you can never say it enough. I just don't think you can ever say it enough, especially in times like this. We have got to find a way, and that is the way, and that is the power that we have.
Thank you, Mike Wiley, who is an acclaimed actor and playwright and the author of the Parchman Hour. We so appreciate you being with us this evening. Don't go anywhere yet. We still have a little ways to go. Chief Boone, final thoughts.
So, first of all, I want to thank you all for allowing me to be part of this panel. It's been really eye-opening for me, and much respect to Ms. Mulholland. Give it to you this way. And when I think about what can we do differently, what can we look at differently, whether it's the 60s or current day, we have these ecosystems. You have health, employment, education, and at the very bottom of that system is law enforcement. We have always been used as agents of social control to manage all that. And now some of those safety nets are starting to break. And what you see now throughout the country is law enforcement being tasked to do way more than they took the oath to do. So what I would leave folks with this: yes, crime reform is necessary. There's some things we can do better in the law enforcement profession. However, let's keep our eyes on those other issues which surrounds employment, education, health, things of that nature, because until those are fixed, okay, we're going to be right back talking about this again. Those are my lasting words.
That is Chief Larry Boone, the police chief of the city of Norfolk. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. Dr. Miller, final thoughts.
So my final thoughts will actually be quotes from other people. There's an African proverb that says, "I am because we are." And what made the Freedom Ride so impactful is because of the collective responsibility and accountability, being each other's keepers. And Nelson Mandela said, "May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears." And so I encourage folks in Virginia, the deadline is October 13th to register to vote, but to make choices for a better existence. A great man said, transformation occurs out of conflict, and we're in conflict, and it's an opportunity for us to transform. And so let us take advantage of that in good.
That is Dr. Khadijah Miller, who is the interim director of the Robert Nussbaum Honors College at Norfolk State University. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And Ms. Mulholland, you have the final word.
Oh my, people said it all already, but we got to keep on keeping on because it ain't over till it's over. And we need to think of the sacrifices that people have made to get us where we are today. And voting, since we're in that season, think of the people that died to make it possible. When I vote, I'll go to Medgar Evers' grave and give thanks.
Thank you so much, Joan Mulholland, a freedom writer. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to have you serve on this panel with us this evening. Thank you so very much. My name is Barbara Hamm Lee. It has been my pleasure to serve as your moderator for tonight's discussion. I do invite you to join me tomorrow at noon on 89.5 WHRV FM for Another View. We will be having our Another View roundtable tomorrow, and we will be talking about the debate, which is going to start in about 15 minutes. So I'm going to turn it back over to Tom Clayton and let him wrap us up.
Thank you so much, Barbara, Mike, Joan, Chief Boone, Dr. Miller. What a fantastic panel. I really am just kind of giddy with what a moving, and this reminds me of your work, Mike, in that we're tackling difficult issues, but you all tackled it with joy and hope, and in a way that I'm walking away feeling uplifted rather than heavy for what the weight of the conversation is. So bravo, everybody. It really was an honor and a privilege to be able to host this fantastic group. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, all of you out there, for joining us. And I hope you all join us for the Parchman Hour. It's running this Thursday through Sunday. You can get tickets through the Virginia Stage Company website. And we had a donor who stepped forward. And so if you are, we have complimentary tickets available for essential workers, for poll workers, for students, and for teachers. So you can reach out to box office at Virginia Stage for information on that. So just once again, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this fantastic panel. And everybody, have a good night, and make sure you're registered to vote and go vote. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Oh, wow.
All right. Yeah, Greg, you can join us for people. You can turn on your videos if you want to applaud. That's actually a great ending. Okay. So anybody who's still here, if you want to turn on your video to applaud, I'd encourage it. Greg Cutter, good to see you.
Oh, look
all right.
at all
Thanks,
the
everybody.
comments. This
all right,
is
Ed
awesome.
Ladd. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Thank you,
yeah.
everybody. Thank you.
What a great
you.
conversation.
And by the way, Joan is a Delta. You might not, folks might not know that. Joan
I
is
did
a Delta.
not know that. Go, Joan.
Oh.
Thank you.
And Mike, I want to ask you very, very quickly, are you familiar with Moorhead Manor Bed and Breakfast in Durham?
Oh, no, I'm not.
Durham, it is in downtown Durham. It is an African-American owned bed and breakfast in a beautiful mansion right in downtown. And you need to check it out. Moorhead Manor Bed and Breakfast. Daniel and Monica Edwards are the innkeepers. And if you want to get away, since you're right down in that area, or anybody for that matter, it is a wonderful place to go.
Thank you for
just want to make sure you were aware of that.
All right, folks. Well, go have a great night. Hope to see you all in the virtual theater coming up. And thanks again, everybody.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.